What is going on, everybody? James Hancock here. Just got out of seeing an early screening of Baz Luhrmann's latest musical epic, Elvis. Saw it down at the Alamo Drafthouse in downtown Brooklyn. And I don't even really know if spoilers apply to a movie that's a biopic. It's Elvis's life. Basically, it's his life from like roughly 1955 to 1977 with a few flashes from his childhood. But I'll keep my comments, appropriately vague in case you are young enough where you don't know the story of Elvis. But Elvis. At times, this movie soars, and Austin Butler, who plays Elvis, who also played Tex in Quentin Tarantino's Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, I would say the movie is 100% worth seeing for him. He can sing, he can dance, he looks great. He's incredible. When Austin Butler is doing his thing on the stage, you will totally understand why women used to rip their panties off and throw them at Elvis while he was performing. And there are times where you really will get like the chills up and down your arms and neck. But when it comes to Baz Luhrmann, I'll say if you love his past work, movies like Gatsby or Romeo and Juliet or Strictly Ballroom or Moulin Rouge, Baz Luhrmann's fans are going to love this. Baz Luhrmann's detractors are going to hate this. And if you're like me, where you kind of have a love-hate relationship with his work, you will have a love-hate relationship with this movie because it's clear that Baz Luhrmann is not interested to the same degree in every aspect of Elvis's career. I lean toward Elvis's pre-Army music from the 50s. I love his body of work. I love the movie stuff. I love his gospel stuff. But I lean towards the 50s stuff. And that period seems to interest Baz Luhrmann very little, apart from all the controversies surrounding Elvis the Pelvis and all that nonsense. But what you can tell is that Baz Luhrmann loves the Vegas period of Elvis's life. And if you've seen any of Baz Luhrmann's movies, it should be abundantly clear why. Because like Vegas, Baz Luhrmann's signature style, it's big, it's loud, it's obvious, it's wildly stylized. It places no demands on the attention span of the viewer. He wants you to be completely bowled over by the experience of his movies at every waking moment. I'll get to more of my critiques and or affection for his work later in the review. But Vegas and Baz Luhrmann go hand in hand. And so everything from the late 60s onward, when Elvis starts to make his big comeback and starts doing public performances again, that's the best stuff of the movie. So it's very rare we see a big, long-ass movie where the second half is much better than the first half. I mean, this movie is 2 hours and 39 minutes. I won't say you feel the length, but it's not a short movie. But I was kind of exhilarated by the second half, and then during the first half, frequently gnashing my teeth in frustration. And if I had to boil down my frustrations with the first half to a few key ingredients, let's start with Mr. Tom Hanks, an actor I have loved and adored my entire life. I saw him in movies like Splash and Bachelor Party as a kid. Ever since I learned how to walk and talk, I've been watching Tom Hanks in movies. I love the guy. If this is not his worst performance ever, it's definitely a strong contender. It's unendurable. It's laughably bad. It's Cats bad. And he's the narrator of the movie. The whole movie is from his point of view. He plays the notorious Colonel Tom Parker, who managed Elvis's career from the mid-50s up to the time of Elvis's death. And he's doing this accent that it's awful. I wish if Tom Hanks had just done his Tom Hanks routine, it wouldn't have been necessarily accurate to the historical figure, but it might have made this movie much better. And then my other major frustrations is with the fact that, like in Gatsby, his adaptation of F. Scott Fitzgerald's The Great Gatsby, he does this thing in the first half where Baz Luhrmann will play 3 or 4 seconds of a period-appropriate song, like Heartbreak Hotel, and then suddenly he'll cut away to or insert some horrendous music from the present day, almost like he doesn't trust the audience to like the music from the 50s. And I was like, fuck you, this music's incredible. He should have given equal love to the 50s music as well as the later tunes. And it just blew my mind that Elvis would be walking around Memphis, Tennessee, and we'd be hearing music from 2022. And for me, it was a horrible distraction. I found it grating. I found it wrecked the atmosphere And what's strange is how when we get into the late 60s and early 70s, that whole approach to the story stops entirely. It's like, well, why did you do that during the 50s music and not during the 70s music? So that was profoundly irritating because the movie makes Memphis and just the South in general in the 50s seem so wild and so insane because Elvis, as both a child and as a young man, loves going to hear like rhythm and blues bands. He loves like kind of peeking through holes in the walls and watching these kind of down and dirty blues musicians playing for people, basically almost like having sex while they're dancing. And then he'll rush over to a tent and, get some spiritual music, some gospel music, and he'll have the spirit flowing all through him. And you really get to see those key influences on his style and how he became the man that he came to be. So if I could go back in time a couple of years to when Baz Luhrmann was first conceiving this movie, I would say just trust your subject. It's a fascinating subject. Elvis is the best-selling solo artist of all time, and people clearly like his music. This is not some random obscure musician that he's trying to kind of like dust off. It's like when you make a movie like Amadeus about Mozart, they play Mozart's music in that movie. They don't say, oh, well, you got to put in something totally present day. No one's going to want to actually listen to Mozart when watching a movie about Mozart. Anyway, I found it kind of comically absurd just how little Baz Luhrmann trusted the music of the period. But enough, I've said enough about that at this point. Let's talk a little bit just about my knowledge of Elvis, because there are people out there, like if you're an Elvis impersonator, I'd rate you like a 10 for your love of Elvis. And if you've never heard Elvis, I'd rate you at a 1. So on a scale of never heard Elvis to Elvis impersonator, I'd say I'm probably about a 5. I've been to Graceland. It was fascinating. It's ridiculous, but everybody should go to Graceland at least once. And I've spent many happy hours listening to Elvis's music. I worked in the accounting department on this movie, America's Sweethearts, back in 2000 and 2001, or just 2000. At any rate, I shared an office, and my boss was an Elvis freak. He would play Elvis constantly. And I've seen a few documentaries about Elvis's life, but I've never memorized his biography. I've never read any of his biographies. I'm not really an expert on his movies in spite of really liking movies. So I know there are going to be people out there who know his life much more intimately than I do. And so I can't speak to what criticisms they might have about the film. But I think one area where we can all agree is that Austin Butler is going to join the ranks of the great Elvis impersonators. And obviously, thousands of people impersonate Elvis to this day. But in terms of stars, we've already seen Kurt Russell do it in the John Carpenter 1979 made-for-TV movie. We saw Bruce Campbell do it in Bubba Hotep. That's one of my favorite Elvis impersonations. Maybe my personal favorite is Val Kilmer in True Romance, but we've seen Quentin Tarantino do it in The Golden Girls. Even Andy Kaufman used to do a fabulous Elvis impersonation. So there's a lot of competition out there. But goddamn, Austin Butler, he's got some chops. There are not a lot of actors out there who are the triple threat, where you can sing, you can dance, and you can act. And having now seen him in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and in Elvis, Austin Butler's a bad motherfucker, and I'll be paying close attention to his movies moving forward. And as part of this special advanced screening, they showed a little documentary before the movie started, and they showed some early footage during pre-production when he was kind of just getting into the skin of his role, learning to inhabit the character, and they showed him just on the set, playing acoustic guitar and singing with the band. And he can sing and play his ass off. It's like, more of those scenes in the movie, please, where he's just, unassisted by any sort of kind of theatrics that Baz Luhrmann insists upon adding to every single second of his movies. So you might be wondering at this point, why do I have such a bone to pick with Baz Luhrmann? Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with him because he can be glorious. His first movie, Strictly Ballroom, I worked at a video store in college, and we could not keep that movie on the shelf. It would fly off the shelf. And Strictly Ballroom, if you've not seen it, I think it was then and is still now today Baz Luhrmann's best movie. It's just delightful. And I think the lack of length and the lack of budget helped him focus. When he has too much money and too much time, he kind of goes insane. But Romeo and Juliet, I remember I had a big fight with my girlfriend back in college because she loved it, and she tried to make me watch it one night while my friend and I were on mushrooms, and we ended up kind of trying to sneak out of the back of the room in the middle of the movie because we couldn't pay attention to it, and I got this big screaming lecture. And Moulin Rouge, I didn't hate or love, I was just kind of indifferent. Australia, I barely remember. And Great Gatsby, or Gatsby, he took one of my all-time favorite novels, this really beautiful, subtle, sophisticated, elegant work of literature, and turned it into this big, loud, obnoxious movie. And I know there are a lot of people out there who really love that movie. They love using it for memes and all that stuff. I think that movie, of all the directors who have ever lived, Baz Luhrmann would have been the last that I would have chosen to direct and adapt that movie. Ernst Lubitsch from like the 30s. That's who you need to direct The Great Gatsby. And I think my main grievance towards Luhrmann boils down to this idea, or at least the impression that I have, he doesn't seem to trust the audience to have the slightest amount of intelligence or attention span to pay attention to a movie for more than 2 or 3 seconds without him basically like shooting a gun in your face and like really like, look at my movie, like just like screaming for your attention. He's probably never been told in his life, less is more. And sometimes less is more. And yeah, if anything, his movies increasingly become more is less over time. But if I were to shower some praise on Baz Luhrmann, I've seen every single movie that he's ever directed. So clearly I like his movies to some degree. Usually with franchises or filmmakers that I dislike, I just kind of let them go and I just ignore them and pretend like they don't exist. I watch every single movie that he makes. So I like his topics, and I love the fact that he's a legit auteur. He's got a signature style. His movies are instantly recognizable. Good, bad, and everything in between. You never doubt that you're watching a Baz Luhrmann movie. But man, I just can't get over the fact that during the first third of this film, I was like, am I ever actually going to hear a song by Elvis for at least like half of it? I mean, forget from start to finish. Baz Luhrmann doesn't have the attention span for that. But can I at least like enjoy one song for more than a few seconds before he has to cut away to something else? And admittedly, he is trying to tackle tons of material. Like I said, he's basically condensing 22 years into 2 hours and 39 minutes. And sometimes he slows down to take a breath, like during the assassination of Martin Luther King Jr. And we see how Elvis is responding to and reacting to the era in which he lives. But there was never a single solitary moment of this entire movie where I felt like checking my watch or wondering when it was going to end. I mean, it had my attention. It's an experience, and I think the movie biz needs experiences like this. I get tired of the lack of options at the multiplex like anybody. And of course, anybody over a certain age is like, oh, all movies are bad and all movies are the same, rah, 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 you know, all the typical screaming at clouds nonsense. But I do like to see every major genre out there represented, and the musical biopic is a totally viable form, and we've seen a lot of them lately. Like a movie like Bohemian Rhapsody, I didn't particularly care for it, but it made vast sums of money and obviously proved that format is very viable. I don't think this movie will do as well commercially as that, but I think it's a better movie. But it will probably make as much money, if not more so, than Rocketman. I didn't really like Rocketman either. But yeah, of all the recent big biopics, Rocketman, Bohemian Rhapsody, and Elvis, I like Elvis the most, so put that on your pipe and smoke it. But one last thing before I start wrapping up this video. I saw this movie down at the Alamo Drafthouse in downtown Brooklyn, and before the show, like before any of their movies, they're showing little funky like documentary clips and just things they've kind of like found on the internet to keep you entertained. And they had this great highlight reel of all the songs that were covered by Elvis throughout his career, and you got to hear and or see the original artists who made those songs, kind of live and breathe in the first place. And that was really cool. Just that, because unlike Baz Luhrmann's movie, it really embraced the fact that those songs are fucking amazing, and just it leaned into them and let you hear them in their entirety. And that was really, really cool. So once again, Alamo Drafthouse always gets an A+ from me in terms of their love of just the content, the movies, the cinema, just the stories themselves. You walk in there, you're surrounded by old movie posters and like old soundtracks and that sort of thing, and just they always get it right. So I had a great experience at the movies, even if I have a lot of criticisms. The movie's too long, Tom Hanks is terrible, and they kind of dropped the ball in the 50s. But if you're interested in Baz Luhrmann or Elvis, definitely go. Like I said, it is an experience, and I have a feeling opinions are going to be all over the map on how people respond to it. And last but not least, a word from the sponsor of my podcast, Wrong Reel, Manscaped, which is the world's foremost expert in precision grooming below the waist with men. And I've been having a lot of my friends and family members try out the products as of late. And I have a relative who will go unnamed so they don't get embarrassed, but their exact review for the products was, dude, that was fucking hype. After putting all the various clippers and powders and ointments to the test, and big fan, and they're less than half my age. So If you're in your late teens, early 20s, and you're a fan of keeping things neat and tidy down below the waist, definitely go to manscaped.com and use the discount code WRONGREEL in all caps, and you'll get about 20% off of your orders. So thanks so much for listening to my review. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel, hitting the bell, and perhaps even sharing the video with your friends. But I hope everyone has a great week or weekend or whatever. But more importantly, as always, onwards and upwards.